You're listening to the Health and Politics podcast, Prevention is the New Cure, with
Former ministers Steve Brine and James Bethell.
Steve. Very, very nice to see you on this freezing winter's morning. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been okay. Yeah, I mean, the whole light of December versus the dark
Mm,
of January is rather getting to me a bit, and it's particularly dark here because there's a lot of work going on at Brine Towers. So all of the living areas are cold and dark, literally cold and dark because they're being decorated. So I'm sort of stuck in my study, cocooned in my study, and there's not a lot of light in the rest of the house. So yes, it is not great from that point of view. We need some light. We need a festival of lights, James.
I've had genomic endorsement of this sentiment because I did a new genomic analysis with very good new company called Gene Store, who are friends of mine, no interest in it. And I've always said my Scottish genes mean that I have not enough vitamin D in the winter. And guess what? Genetically, that is true. And if you look at my bloods, that is also true. So Perplexity's view on my health is that I am a massive vitamin D deficiency candidate, and I should be leaning into supplements and all sorts of blue lights and things like that. So this has been scientifically proven that my anecdotal Scottish genes are very weak in this area.
Yeah, no, I think there's something in that. I mean, I think we do as humans, we like the light, don't we? And maybe that's one of the reasons why, obviously, that and a big holiday coming up is that, Christmas is so full of lights, isn't it? And it's so full of brightness and hope. And I think January can be quite difficult from that point of view. Anyway, look, so much to get on with our little podcast. Huge reaction actually to last week. We were talking about SMA, spinal muscular
Yeah,
atrophy, which the young lady Jessie from Little Mix revealed that her daughters have been diagnosed with. Huge reaction to that. And I noticed the Secretary of State has responded positively to the message she's put out. So fingers crossed on that. I thought today, James, we might start with talking about the mobile phone ban for under 16s, which has been proposed by Kimmy Badenoch. It's quite interesting. No doubt we have views. Then we're going to talk about the first patient receiving this new CAR T treatment
yep.
at Manchester Royal Infirmary. And then I was at the IFG conference this week where Wes Streeton was speaking. So we'll talk about that and then we'll go on and touch on the new GP contract negotiations, which are underway at the moment. But back to the top, mobile phones under 16s. I have one under 16. You have one still, I think.
Yep. So I've got four kids, 19-year-old, 16-year-old, 14-year-old, and 11-year-old. So this is really salient for me. And Steve, I have very rarely seen an issue move so emphatically, so quickly as this issue has done in the last 3 weeks. I've been working on it for 3 years, and I work very hard on the online safety bill. I don't want to go through it all, but can I just say that there has been huge resistance at every level to the idea of having an under 16 ban. People are concerned about the rights of children, about giving them media literacy, and about giving children the benefits of being part of a community. Those are good arguments, but something has hugely shifted. There has been grave concerns by parents about social media building last year with the phones free schools movement. But it's really been the Australia ban that is so plucky by the Australians and has delivered a massive political boost for the for the government there and seems to have worked out so far quite well. And then the Grok AI incident has
Yeah, I
just
saw that.
totally electrified the debate, and everyone is now just sort of given up and fed up with the tech company, or particularly Elon Musk, but all of them, and just their credibility, particularly with women and children, it's just in the gutter at the moment. So number 10, and Keir Starmer personally massively rejected all of this stuff for a long time. So did the Department for Education. So did Peter Kyle. There was a real institutional resistance in the government to doing this, supported by many in Parliament who have a different view. And suddenly it is all shifted. Jonathan Haidt is going to Downing Street next week. The media is strongly on side. And in the House of Lords, there is an amendment that's been knocking around for quite a long time to the Children and Wellbeing Bill by Lord Nash, former Education Minister, to bring in an Australian-style under 16 ban for kids. And I would have said 2 months ago that it was going to be kite flying, but nothing else. I think there's really strong momentum. It comes up for a vote on Wednesday. and there's a strong chance it'll come through. That doesn't mean it will necessarily immediately go onto the statute book. It then gets knocked to the Commons, and the amendment probably isn't fully formed yet. It needs some work on it. But this issue, I think, is going to take a great leap forward. And I personally have been a big supporter of it. I think it's hard to get the tech companies to manage their algorithms better. They just fight it. So you have to police the perimeter. You have to protect children from the algorithms and filth and time spent on phones. Otherwise, we're going to destroy the next generation. Steve, how do you feel about it? I'm not quite sure if you're such an emphatic supporter as I am.
Look, I mean, I have a 15-year-old boy, and it is a constant battle, as I'm sure you know, with the phone. Just the social media, the messaging, the way that relationships these days are all
Yeah,
about messaging. I mean, goodness knows how we were ever born. So yeah, I have that battle. It sounds from what you're saying, and you would know better than me being inside Parliament, that there is political momentum for this now. But I just wonder whether Kemi Badenoch suggesting it, presumably the Prime Minister's therefore going to have to embrace what Kemi said again. And okay, good for him if he's big enough to do that. I'm all for restricting because I think the mental health impact of these things are not great, and we don't know the long-term mental health impact of them. The reason I'm slightly circumspect, I suppose, is just because so much of the phone is integral to life. For some children, from a health monitoring point of view, diabetics, for instance, but also, so much of my son's life, whether it be the hockey fixture that's this Saturday or the timetable or where the bus is, it's all on the phone. At the same time, the school are pushing through now tougher mobile phone policies. So I just wonder, in the reality of modern world, how is it going to work?
I think that the answer to that is not crystal clear. I wouldn't pretend otherwise. But what my ambition would be to get the algorithm out, even if it's not the messaging. So I'm not saying that there isn't any harm in things like WhatsApp, but it really is the targeting of kids of increasingly violent, sexual, and intimidating content by algorithms on things like Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube videos that is really the thing that has caused us. And it's this addictive scrolling that means that the attention and development of children's brains isn't fully formed. So, two things just to note, actually, three things. One is PISA scores are coming down. That has an impact on our economy and our ability to have an effective workforce. That's been a huge change in the Treasury. Secondly, is that clinicians are moving on this. They had been reluctant because they didn't feel that there was clinical studies, but actually now the frontline observational data from clinics themselves is so powerful that they're beginning to change their mind. And thirdly, backbench Labour MPs have shifted. I don't know if you remember, but there was an attempt on this by Josh McAllister, now an education minister, to bring in a measure like this about 18 months ago. And he got rained on by the whips really heavily and humbled very, very publicly. And they kept quiet about it. I think what's happened is that the reverberations from that incident have led to a lot of backbench Labour MPs worrying that this is going to be another doorstep barnacle, and they just want to scrape it off.
No, no, it makes sense. And of course, we're slightly talking at cross purposes here because I'm talking about the wider use of a phone, whereas
Mm,
this is really about social media. But there is also campaigns, of course, not to have a smartphone. And so much of life is about the
yeah,
smartphone for young people. But no, in terms of the social media algorithms, I mean, was there much about life that was worse without social media? I'm not sure there was really. So no, I mean, fair play again. I think I said on a tweet, and I saw you back her up, and Kemi Badenoch. I mean, look, I'm not an active member of any political party. I was a Conservative MP, but I sometimes a politician, sometimes it's an opposition politician, catches a political mood. They
yeah,
capture a moment, and it feels a bit like she keeps doing that right now. And credit
she
to
does.
her because that is her job. But she has done that on this, and I hope the Prime Minister and his ministers are big enough to say, "Yeah, we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do." Not, we're not going to do it because Kemi said. Anyway, what else? CAR-T.
Yes, what an incredible medical breakthrough. Patient at Manchester Royal Infirmary has become the first in the UK to receive this CAR-T treatment for aggressive blood cancer. I am just so impressed by this. I have a small interest that I'm a Ned on a cell therapy firm that has a wonderful developed cell that you can inject into people's hearts to remove the scarring that might cause them cardiac damage. So if you've had a heart attack and your heart is really, really struggling to get back to full fitness, we're going to open you up and inject our cells into you. And those cells will regenerate, literally regenerate the calcified cells of your heart so that you can restore its full fitness. My goodness, what an incredible breakthrough. Given that there's so much cardiac damage around the world, the thought that technology can address something so fundamental is really exciting. So this is another example of UK life sciences at its best. I think it's a real success story for prevention and the early intervention philosophy. Steve, have you come across this one?
In Singapore, actually, funnily enough, when we took the Health Social Care Select Committee there a couple of years ago, before when I was still in Parliament and chairing that committee, and we met one of the original innovators of CAR T therapy, who now works there, sadly, and they were telling us about the promise of it, which was really exciting. And this young man who's received this, and people will have seen it in the news this week, he's called Oscar Murphy. He's only
Yeah.
28 years old, and it's at Manchester Royal Infirmary. And he actually married his girlfriend in the hospital a few weeks ago because they didn't actually, well, a few months ago, because they didn't actually know how this one was going to play out. And he's now
Wow.
received this treatment, and he said it was very sci-fi. And it's for his blood cancer that he's got it, and he had it back on the 2nd of January. So what a start to the new year for him. And a very fast acting type of leukemia that he had, which is called B cell ALL. And so we wish Oscar and his new wife the best, because they are on the sci-fi cutting edge.
It's a brilliant. Listen, there's so many frustrating things about public health at the moment, but the science is driving us. I mean, we are going to be, people ask me, how is Britain ever going to be healthier? And the short answer is science like this is going to take us there.
Yeah. Now, I was at the Institute for Government conference this week.
Yes, how was
I
that?
joined it online for quite a bit of the day because I had to write some reports. So I was at my desk, and they had their annual conference, and they started it with a keynote speech by Mr. Wes Streeting, who was on quite usual, I suppose, robust form. He seems to have got over the elitist nonsense, which he's how he described think tanks when they dared to challenge the government's introduction of league tables for hospitals. But he went there and he spoke, and as he likes to do, he did sort of say, look, I'm not for turning. He reiterated that he's not for backing down, and these fights that he's having around these different elements, not least on doctors' pay. He was very robust about that. But it was in a question actually at the end from the Telegraph, which has sort of made the news, is that somebody from Telegraph asked him about U-turns because there had been one on pubs last week, and of course there's subsequently been another one this week on the mandatory element of
Yeah.
digital ID. And he basically said, look, we have something in the NHS called GIRFT, which stands for Get It Right First Time, as you know. And he said, I think our New Year's resolution as a government, brackets Keir Starmer, should be to GIRFT, Get It Right First Time. And that has hit quite a lot of the headlines since, and of course made it into PMQs yesterday when the leader of the opposition said, did the Prime Minister agree that he should get it right first time? So, yeah, Wes was on pretty robust form. And I guess his point about Get It Right First Time, James, is that you hear lots of ministers complaining, don't you? We're pulling the levers and things are not working. And his point was, can we stop moaning? Can we stop constantly carping about the levers not working? We're the politicians. We're the ones in power. If we want change, we need to make that change. And this is seen as being a bit of a direct attack on number 10, whether it is or not,
Yeah.
who knows? But I'm sure you saw the coverage.
It was an attack on number 10. It is also, though, listen, from my own experience as a minister, there is a problem in the UK way of doing things. I was in Taiwan for Christmas, and I met the person who founded the Taiwanese NHS about 15 years ago. Very wise, just exactly as you would imagine, thoughtful Chinese gentleman. And I said, how did you do it with such success? Because they've got 92% sign-up rate at the moment. And he said, and he's clever and he spoke beautiful English. He obviously knew Britain well. He said, we built it and then we announced it. Now, that is a radical thought in Britain because we always do the absolute opposite. We announce it, then we try to get funding, and then we try to implement it. And guess what? Public sympathy and support is not there. We run into all sorts of problems. We've got to get out of that habit. And it's just immature, sloppy politics, bad execution. And so, yes, I think he was having a crack at number 10. But behind it is a really, really important point. I hope doesn't get lost.
Yeah, the other thing that he did is he mentioned the abolition of NHS England, and he said to the Institute for Government, look, you can't have it both ways. You can't both describe the abolition of NHS England as a distraction and say there's not enough GP appointments, there's not enough staff in the NHS, etc., as if they're two sides of the same coin. Because of course, the very person who said abolishing NHS England and going for another reorganisation of the NHS's structures would be a, and I quote, distraction. So, it's a
Yeah,
little bit cheeky, but yeah, no, he was on quite combative form, and they had some quite interesting people on the panel. They had Ed Balls, who's a trustee at the Institute for Government. They had Andy Burnham, Michael
right.
Gove, Mel Strider, Shadow Chancellor, did a keynote speech, and Baroness Casey was there actually.
Yeah, wow.
More talking about how decisions are made in government than she was actually talking about the things she's been asked to do around adult social care, which didn't really get discussed that often, even though she was introduced as such. But no, I mean, look, the Institute for Government, I think, are a good thing. They're quite nerdy and quite techy, but that's literally the point.
Yeah.
And I always think they bring quite interesting guests to the table. So yeah, that was one of the things I
Well,
did earlier this week.
if I just don't mind making a final point on this, I listen. I really enjoy the West Streeting show. I think he's funny and combative, and he says sort of unspeakable things that I'm often thinking myself. But there is no implementation plan still for the 10-year plan. So
Mm.
it's all very well him being sort of combative, but where's the flipping implementation plan? Because you have just announced a whole big vision and absolutely no sense of how it's actually going to be delivered. And I think that does hang over him quite badly.
Yeah. Which takes us rather neatly, I suppose,
Yes, it
onto
does.
talking about the GP contract. And let me explain why. So, the negotiations for GP contract, which I used to do as primary care minister for 26-27, are now underway in earnest. And this is all very tied up with the increasingly bitter row between the Secretary of State and the British Medical Association. So, the GP committee of the BMA were the sole negotiators between government, NHS England over the contract. And they would have many meetings, thrash it out, and then it would be announced. Now, the BMA are being given one meeting.
Yeah,
They are part of the process only. They're at
yeah,
one
quite right.
consultee alongside the Royal College. Um, and so they're quite cross about that. And what they've done is put out there in public, I suppose, their asks for the new GP contract. So they want to see about a £50 per patient uplift in what we call the global sum. They want changes in this online access where practices feel it's not safe to be able to turn it off during the working day. I think they want big changes to the RS scheme, the additional roles reimbursement scheme, to
Yep.
deliver sort of practice level funding, I suppose, for hiring instead of it going via primary care networks. And this process is going on at the moment. And the reason why I think it's tied to that point you were making about implementation plan is because all of this, you can't overlook the new neighbourhood health contracts, which
Yep.
are due to be published probably this month. And GP practices are working with lawyers to come together in federations, some of them already in those, maybe primary care networks, maybe whisper it, integrated care boards, to make sure that they're the ones that land these new neighbourhood health contracts. Because as we've discussed before on the podcasts, general practice is very nervous about these neighbourhood health contracts going somewhere else, maybe to acute trusts, and then the money just literally bypassing general practice. So it's quite nerdy, it's quite technical, but I would say GP contract negotiations is something really acutely to watch in the early part of 2026.
Yeah. Listen, you're the super expert on this. You've put it very well. I know from being a sort of downstream person on all of this, I just always found the GP contract this rigid structure that almost anything that you wanted to change in primary care, you had to negotiate, and you were told, oh, you have to wait 5 years until we negotiate this again. Surely, Steve, there must be a slightly more dynamic, flexible way of doing this that allows tweaking and changing as we go along a bit more.
Well, maybe this speaks to a wider point, James, is that I've always had this theory, which I can't back up in any way, shape, or form, so it's a great theory, is that I always think Labour governments have a more difficult relationship with general practice than a Conservative government. I think it's historical. I think it goes way back to the foundation of the NHS. They're not quite part of the NHS in the Labour mindset, which of course they're not. They operate
Yes.
merely under contract to the NHS. And I think if you then throw into that mixing bowl this very antagonistic relationship between the government and the BMA over the resident doctor strike, which of course has
Yep.
fed through into so much else, I think you do have the ingredients here for quite a difficult contract negotiation. But I hear you, and I have the scars on my back from them. They
Yeah, I
are
bet.
incredibly difficult. But I think broadening it out to it not just being a closed private discussion between
Yes.
government and the BMA, surely, I mean, that has to be a good thing. We have to
I'd
be
have
able to see what people are demanding.
100%. You bet. No, very
I
well
think
put.
just the final point on this is that when I was chairing the select committee, we did quite a bit of work around obviously pay in the NHS, and the pay review body process is this another anarchic
Yeah.
process, which it often starts too late and then
Yeah.
reports after those pay rounds should have come in. So often it will report after April the 1st. The DDRB, which is the Dentists and Doctors Pay Review Body, is probably this year, credit to this DH, is probably going to report earlier than it has for years, and
Yeah.
probably before the GP contract negotiations are complete. So it'll be interesting to see where that lands in terms of the pay uplift or not that is recommended for doctors. But we've got to get ahead of that. If you are an acute trust, James, right now, or you are running a GP practice right now, you don't know how much money that you
I
have
know.
to budget for from April the 1st.
It's crazy.
And it's the 15th of January as we record this. That's no way to run anything, is it? You wouldn't run a
No,
business that way.
it's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
Um,
now, now,
yes, what do you
actually,
got?
well, this flows also neatly though. You've scheduled
It's
this
almost as
so
if we
well.
planned this, isn't it?
I'm in the hands of a programming genius.
Yes, yes,
So talking of the GP contract, health visitor vaccination pilot. This is
yes.
great. I mean, this is. Can we please have more of this kind of thing? So the NHS is testing a smart idea. Health visitors, great heroes of frontline public health, are going to be equipped to vaccinate children at home in 12 pilot schemes across England. It's all about reaching families who are struggling to access GP services. And hopefully they'll have it'll be combined with the new MMRV vaccine, which protects against measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox, which you'll remember was announced
Mm.
earlier in the month. And I honestly think this could seriously improve childhood vaccination rates. The bit of it that makes me excited is that I was very aware as a minister that there is a large chunk of Britain, a quarter or a third, that has almost no interaction with the NHS at all. And that's where a lot of our illness and a lot of the people who subsequently walk into A&E pissing blood and with severe disease come from. And it's during the pandemic, that was where a lot of the illness and the potential damage to our healthcare system and our economy lived. And we stretched really hard to reach into those communities and largely got there because we did manage to vaccinate up and down the country. So as a system, if we have the resources, we do know how to do this. But we have stuck to slightly rigid primary care-led vaccination protocols. And we need to free this up. We need to get the pharmacists and the healthcare workers and the health visitors much, much more engaged. So these pilots, although they seem a bit obscure, are for me an icebreaker for a different way of doing vaccination and really could improve access amongst key communities who just aren't engaged, don't know their NHS number. Okay, they went to a maternity wing to have their children, but subsequent to that, hardly ever engaged with the health system. So really excited about this.
Yeah, and that's probably linked, isn't it, back to this neighborhood health, the whole hospital to community shift is that,
Hmm.
yes, health visitors, you mentioned the word there, the P word, pharmacists, and we probably should do something actually on community pharmacy soon, which as former pharmacy minister, I'm very passionate about it. We created
Yeah.
pharmacy first for a reason. But, pharmacy is also now going through its next round of contract negotiations. That starts very, very soon. And if we want pharmacies to survive as healthcare centres on the high street, we are going to have to put business their way because they are closing
Yeah,
and
I
they
know.
are closing fast. So I would say that vaccination is the way to do that. When it came to the covered public with the flu vaccination before Christmas. So people who weren't eligible for a fee vaccine, the self-pay group, pharmacists once again saved the day, and people
Yep.
went in their droves and paid for their vaccination at pharmacies. Government could do so much more with community pharmacy, and vaccination, working with the health visitor vaccination pilots, could be the route for that.
Steve, I hear your love and I support your
I love
love
it.
for pharmacies. Can I just return though to health visitors? Health visitors
Mhm.
are hugely unloved. I remember being in meetings where eyes rolled because the mental image of health visitors is people on bicycles pootling around, having coffee at huge cost to the system and doing five sessions a day. They're regarded as incredibly inefficient. I'm involved in another company, which do have a financial interest in, called Heim. They're using algorithms to ensure three things: one, that the route that the health visitor takes is optimized; two, that when they arrive, they have all the health records that they need; and three, if necessary, they can call in to a GP or into a hospital to corroborate or to get a diagnosis or a prescription. In other words, they're kind of digitally maximized, kick-ass health visitors, hugely more efficient. Now, if we can actually get into people's homes, people who don't want to go to a GP surgery, we've got to recognize that most of the country dreads going to hospital and does not like going to a GP surgery. So if we can get into some of these people's homes, I really think we can catch disease earlier and treat it better.
Yeah. You're saying health visitors are viewed a bit, it's all a bit cool the midwife, is how
Yeah,
they're viewed at the
absolutely.
moment.
100%.
But I can just say that hashtag kick-ass digitally enabled health visitors.
That's it.
This
I
could
love that.
this could start trending.
Yep.
If you're a health visitor, you listen to this Health and Politics podcast, and you are digitally enabled kick-ass. We'd love to hear from you. Bit of a short episode this week, James. But should we end by talking about your dry January?
Yeah, well, it's a bit disaster, Steve.
Why?
Well, listen, I'm a big supporter of abstinence. I sometimes do fasting. I hate it, but it's just so good for you. I mean, it's just really resets the clock. I give up things periodically. I'm not very good at it. I've got to, I'm not like a Rishi Sunak, sort of ultra disciplined person, but I have a stab at it. And my personal health benefits are just enormous. I mean, they really are. I did the George Osborne 5-3 thing. It was so good for me. I've got to do it again. And to not drink I didn't drink for 2 years. I did a reboot when I was about 42 years old. I'd had too many children, too much stress, was drinking far too much. Again, it completely reset my relationship with alcohol. I know that sounds sort of very pompous and grand, but it really helps. And I think dry January is a good idea. I tried to introduce it to Parliament, and I was taken to one side by friends who like me and said, "Mate, you're just committing political suicide. People already think you're quite weird. This will really kill off your reputation in Parliament." So I have backed off trying to close the bars in Parliament in January. But I just think it's a really good thing to do. How's your dry January going, Steve?
Okay, let me ask you this question, James. Do you turn the heating off, or do you manage it via your thermostat?
Oh yeah, no, I have a whole digitally enabled kick-ass system for doing that.
There's that word again. Here's my point. Is dry January the drinking version of turning one's heating on and off as one feels too hot or too cold? My point being this is that, as we discussed last week, I was away in France over New Year and we were skiing. Yes, there's quite a lot of après that goes on, including
Yeah, I
quite a bit
bet.
of drinking. Um, to then stop nothing in January, is it then okay to then get back on the bike fast on February the 1st? What I'm saying is, medically, Dr. Bethell, how does it work when one goes up and then down and then up and then down? Wouldn't it be better to be consistent and doesn't dry January? And I get it, record numbers of people are doing it this month. Doesn't it sort of go against sensible everything in moderation?
Well, yes and no. Where I think you have a good point is a month isn't nearly long enough. Like a month is enough to really hurt, but not enough to really change your relationship with alcohol. I did, for instance, find a year off alcohol. That really did change. It meant that physiologically, my need to have a drink when I'm stressed or on a Friday did pass by. And it meant that also I could socialize without drinking without worrying about it. And that is I mean, Parliament, I find it really tough. So yes, a month isn't long enough. That said, I think that little efforts to just go back to zero every now and again. I sometimes don't eat meat for a bit. I sometimes don't eat bread for a bit. Those things, I think they remind you about the excesses in your life and try to sort of get back to some kind of norm. But you are right that it is long-term small changes that really reboot our system. Sort of severe, abstinence doesn't really change your fundamental health. I agree with that.
Yeah, well, it's a good job we don't ski in January because toffee vodka would be off the agenda, and
There we go.
I don't drink much at all. I am weird. I very rarely drink, so I don't find dry January a thing. I suppose maybe that's why I'm just a bit guarded on the subject because for me, I don't find the Friday night drink a temptation.
Right.
But I know what you're saying about Parliament. I mean, I do remember the time in Parliament. I actually very, very, very rarely had a drink when I was an MP because I could see how that could
Yeah.
become a slippery slope. And you know what? It was my place of work. So why I wouldn't go to an office now in my new life and have a glass of wine at lunchtime. So why on earth would I have done it when I was in Parliament? And maybe that makes me as weird as you and your kick-ass lifestyle. Anyway, look, always a pleasure to see you. So much going on. If you want to feed back on what you hear or disagree with our kick-ass discussions, then you are very welcome to do so. And we take it on the chin and we might even discuss it. So you can email us at preventionisthenewcurepodcast@gmail.com, which is the mailbox that both of us see. And you can comment on our social media channels, which many people do. And you can comment there on what we're discussing. And indeed, you can suggest things that we might discuss in the future. Ain't that right, James?
Indeed. Yeah, no, please get engaged and we promise to reply. Thank you very
Yep.
much.
See you next week.
Thanks, Steve. Take
Bye.
care. Bye bye.